You're watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.
It's a Monday, so that means it's Mondays with McGuire, Pierre, Dan, and the Toronto Maple Leafs. Coming off a game against the Montreal Canadiens in which the Montreal Canadiens, they're sniffing around a wild card, but they were brought back down to earth.
Dan, that was a wild Saturday night at the Bell Center in Montreal. The Canadiens have a 3-0 lead. The game's about to turn at the start of the second period. Christian Dvorak off the post, Bobby McMahon the other way to the back of the net on a mini 2-on-1. It makes it 3-1. The thing caves in for Montreal the rest of the night. They do a fantastic job on the Toronto side, especially with their star power, and eventually they win 7-3. But it shows you how finite the game can be. 3-0 lead for a young team on a Saturday night in Montreal on their home ice, and boom, the whole thing swings after a shot off the post, a 2-on-1 the other way, and the Leafs blow them out.
For the Toronto Maple Leafs, does this give them the mindset now where they have convinced themselves, if they needed convincing, guys, we have the other gear we need?
I think it started earlier this season. You can go back to a game in New Jersey where they did not have their A game. They got bailed out by Anthony Stolarz, a native of Edison, New Jersey. He does a great job. Austin Matthews wakes up in that game, dominates with Mitchell Marner. They win that game. You look at the game against New Jersey on Thursday night in Toronto. They don't have an A game, but Austin Matthews and Mitchell Marner wake up. They win that game in overtime. And they're doing this without John Tavares right now, which I think is really impressive. So the answer is yes. I think Toronto players do know they have another year to go, and they're just going to keep getting better as the season goes along.
So essentially what you're saying is this team's confidence is at an all-time high.
It should be right now. I'll give you an example. When Max Domi got walked by Josh Anderson in the first period of that game on Saturday night, and it became 3-0 Montreal, I didn't see a lot of panic on the Toronto Maple Leafs bench. I saw a lot of excitement on the Canadiens bench, but I didn't see panic on Toronto's bench. And then all of a sudden they come back. The McMahon goal gets them back in the game. Then Oliver Ekman-Larsson makes a fantastic play, and boom, you start to take off. So I think the Toronto Maple Leafs feel real good about themselves, where they are as a group. And let's remember, the Tavares injury is pretty significant for them. The Stolarz injury is pretty significant for them. I'm really excited about their team. I have been all year, and I just keep getting more excited about them.
In my mind, I approached the NHL season with pre-Super Bowl hockey and post-Super Bowl hockey. Mm-hmm. Being pre-Super Bowl, figure things out, not as many eyeballs. Post-Super Bowl, that's where the rubber hits the road. Does the significance of the Super Bowl actually have an effect on NHL teams?
Well, it does in terms of TV ratings, for sure. Once the NFL season's over and the college football season's over, and obviously college will end on Monday night between Ohio State and Notre Dame. Once that's over, that helps the ratings, and it leads to more eyeballs. And I think after the Super Bowl, 100%, you're spot on. See, I break down the season in three ways. I have it U.S. Thanksgiving, that's season number one up until that point. Then I have it to the NHL trade deadline. That's the second part of the season, which is kind of around, obviously, the Super Bowl. And then you go into the stretch run or the run to the playoffs, and that's the third part of the season. So I'm kind of with you. The one thing I would say, though, that you can't argue these numbers, Dan, is when you get to the All-Star break, obviously we don't have one this year because of the Four Nations event. If you're 10 points or more out of a playoff position since 2006, only two teams have made the playoffs, being 10 points or more out from 2006 on. So if you're double-digit points or more out of the playoffs by the time we get to the Four Nations, you're not making the playoffs this year. It's just that clear cut.
Big week for the Leafs coming up. They have the Bolts tonight, Jackets Wednesday, and then they play the Senators on Saturday before they face the Wild next week. And then they have a very big Western road trip, a trip in which if a Leaf is new to the team, they realize, wow, this team travels pretty well because you go into Western barns where 80% of it are Leaf fans.
100% correct. When I was working at the beginning of my media career with the Montreal Canadiens, it was the same thing. At the holiday season, usually around between Christmas and New Year's, we'd go to Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, And it was just amazing. What you just talked about is so true with Toronto, and it's very true with Montreal as well. So the answer is, yeah, I think if you're a new player with the Leafs, you're going to find out just how big the brand is, especially in Western Canada.
It's not the same as it used to be in Edmonton. There's a lot. The Leafs fans get drowned out a lot more now, I think.
Well, I think it's bigger, especially in Edmonton, because of McDavid and Draisaitl and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins and Darnell Nurse. And the fact they took a run to the final last year and lost in a Game 7, I think that helps Edmonton a lot. We'll see whether Connor McDavid's playing or not, Dan. That's another story for another show.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, the cross-check to the face of Connor Garland on Saturday night, I'm not sure that's going to be well received around the league, and I don't think it'll be well received by the people on player safety. That was an egregious play by Connor, really bad.
He seemed to have finally had enough. So playing devil's advocate, people are saying, well, the guy, he couldn't get him off him. What is he supposed to do? And he just went to that area you aren't supposed to do. But McDavid was fed up.
Yeah, I think he could have done it another way. Old school, drop your gloves, grab the guy and administer maybe a beating or maybe not. I don't know. But I don't think there's ever an appetite for cross checks to the face from anybody.
No.
And here's how I would phrase it. And in my world, I've got friends on both sides, in Edmonton and in Vancouver. So I don't care who wins and loses. I want everybody to do well. If let's just say you're an Edmonton fan, and Connor Garland's a guy that's on the ice, and he's getting mauled by McDavid, and he gets up and cross-checks Connor McDavid in the face. What do you want to happen to Connor Garland?
Mm-hmm.
You probably want a lot of stuff happening to him.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the same thing. I'm not saying they're the same players, because they're clearly not. But that was not a very good situation for the Edmonton Oilers or for Connor McDavid.
What his coaches could do is what I do with my kids. Oh, you think you have it bad, and then tell them how we never had cell phones and our parents never checked on us. They could play the Connor old footage of how guys used to get manhandled on the ice, and there were no calls.
Well, I coached two guys it was a tackle football era in the National Hockey League, and Jaromir Jagr and Mario Lemieux used to get tackled all the time, and they just found a way to fight through it. It was amazing when the red line was in play and teams were playing the 1-2-2 trap, or teams were playing a box and one down low defensive coverage. You should have seen the stuff that was going on. Hey, and if you don't believe me, go watch the 2004 Stanley Cup final between the Calgary Flames and the Tampa Bay Lightning. Whomever scored the first goal of any game won that game. There was never a lead change in any one of the 7 games. And if you go watch Game 7, it was tackle football on ice. It was I was there broadcasting with Bobby McKenzie and Gordon Miller, and I can tell you right now, every game was tackle football, but Game 7, it was tackle football.
The best was watching guys go through the neutral zone, and the opposing player would just hitch a ride the entire way up the ice by hooking them. That's right. How they contain guys.
But Dan, I can take it one step further. We used to practice that. Every team in the league would practice that. It was called a neutral zone hold-up drill. And what you would do is you dump the puck in, the opposition would break. This was in practice. They'd break out. And if you were a winger or a centerman, you got a lock. It was called locking on your guy. You had to lock on your guy and take him all the way into your own zone. And if you didn't do that, you weren't doing the drill right. So we were teaching players how to cheat the game.
Speaking of cheating the game, it's still happening in the NHL, and I don't know if there's any way to get rid of this because I know everyone knows it's there. On a dump-in, the opposing defenseman still throws up interference at the line on the guy charging that dump-in. Is there any way we can get rid of that without bogging down the game with more calls?
I think you've got to almost keep a little of that in the game. The one thing I'd like to do is get the trapezoid out so the goalies can get more in play handling the puck. I don't want to see defensemen get injured, Dan. And one of the things is especially because teams have figured out the short side shooting. So let's say I'm the right winger coming up and I'm attacking your left defense, and I chip it off the boards and I create a foot race situation with my support man coming through the middle. That defenseman that has to go make the play on the puck, the opposition's left defenseman, he's going to get killed. So if he doesn't get a hold up from the right side guy, it's a problem. But if the goalies can go out and play the puck, take the trapezoid out, I think it alleviates a lot of the pressure on those defensemen. And if goalies play the puck, you know what it leads to, Dan? Mistakes. And mistakes lead to goals, and people like to see goals.
So with that in mind, let's take out the trapezoid behind the net. That's got to be coming, right? Can we get rid of it?
I sure hope so. So the reason why the trapezoid was put in, that was the punishment for Marty Brodeur being good at his craft, Eddie Belfour being good at his craft, Tommy Barrasso being good at his craft, Marty Turco down in Dallas being really good at his craft. That was the punishment for all those goalies that played for coaches that believed in the 1-2-2 trap, utilized the red line as a boundary, forced a lot of shoot-ins, and allowed those goalies who could skate and handle the puck to become very omnipresent and be almost a third defenseman. So it was a punishment rule. It was taking away a skill of guys that really perfected it. I get it. But now with the red line out, I see no need for the trapezoid to be there.
And not a single person would shed a tear if we got rid of it.
I don't think so. Not now. So the reason why a lot of guys, maybe the jealous guys back in the day, wanted that trapezoid put in is because they didn't have goalies that could do that. They didn't have coaches that could create the 1-2-2 trap. They didn't know how to utilize a red line as a boundary. So I could see why it happened then. I was coaching, so I could tell you, you coach against Hitchcock, you coach against Lemaire, you coach against Bowman in the left wing lock in Detroit or in Pittsburgh. You find out how hard it is to get through the neutral zone. So if those teams don't have good goalies that can handle the puck, it's a problem. It's a problem. But now take the thing out, and you'll see. Yeah. You'll open up the game a lot more.
Do we have an update on Johnny Tavares?
I do not personally. I hope he's back sooner rather than later. The good news is for Toronto, with Matthews playing as well as he is, with Domi outside of the one blunder against Josh Anderson on Saturday night, I think Max has played really well. There's some chemistry there with Nylander and McMahon, which is exciting if you're a Leaf fan. But I like where Holmberg is playing right now for Toronto. I think he's playing really well. And I think it's given some other players an opportunity to play a little bit more, maybe a kid like Nick Robertson. So I hope Johnny's back sooner rather than later because they need him if they're going to go on a prolonged run. But I don't have any updates at all.
At the start of the year, if you looked at this week, you said this is an easy 6 points for the Leafs. That's not the case now where we are in the season and where we are in the standings with the Bolts in a playoff spot and the Jackets and Sens desperate for any 2 points they can get. This is a tough week.
The good news is 2 of those games are at home, which is great with Tampa and Columbus. The bad news is that game next Saturday night, they went through Montreal this past Saturday. Now they got to go into Ottawa on Saturday night, a huge national broadcast game. Not easy. A lot of emotion this week. Columbus is far better than people think. Part of it is I don't think people realize the emotion they're playing with in Columbus because of the fact that, the Goudreau brothers and the respect the entire organization and the community had for Johnny Goudreau. So those guys are playing for a purpose. They really are, and it matters with Columbus right now. And if you look at Tampa, they're not ready to cede to anybody that they're not a legitimate contender. And one of the best players in the league right now and not getting nearly enough credit is Nikita Kucherov. Kucherov is super elite right now, Dan, for Tampa. So it's a big week. And then Ottawa, you talked about it. It's not easy. Brady Tkachuk's leading by example. Jake Sanderson's gone to another level. They're getting really good goaltending. Yesterday in New Jersey, Anton Forsberg was off the charts good. Levi Marilainen's a kid that was there when I was part of the management group. You could see he's going to be a very good player. So goaltending's not an issue in Ottawa. They're getting better defensive play. Travis Green and his staff done a good job, and Brady's leading by example. Brady's just playing unbelievably well.
With the Senators, is it just a case of this team finally found some confidence?
That and they're getting more mature. You can see the leadership of Brady. You can see the leadership of Josh Norris. You can see where Jake Sanderson is playing. You could see when it became physical the other day against Boston on a Saturday afternoon. They had guys who could answer the bell. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and I think now there's new ownership. Now there's clear vision for where they want to go long term. They're going to be a tough out. They've been built to be good for a while. It just took some maturation. I think that maturation's kicking in.
Pierre, As always, we thank you for these Mondays.
Go Georgetown lacrosse, box lacrosse guys. There's your man, Big Dan O'Toole.
Thanks for watching Toronto Sports Rush on the Bet Rivers Network.